All right. It's Tom Dutta here, and we're live. We're live streaming everyone against YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And well, this is a brand new series, and it is called Way of the Quiet Warrior Real News. I'm excited to tell you that we are making a major feature film, and I wanted to do a series of these recordings and maybe create my own indie film at some point down the road that will be used as bonus footage in this movie. But today I want to focus on how did we get here? How did we get to creating a feature film? And how did a guy like me, Tom Dutta, for those of you who don't know me, you can visit my website, www.create, that's KREAT.ca, and you'll be able to find my bio under the Who page. And why I think that's important to share a little bit about who I am is I never imagined I'd be sitting here in role of a movie producer, let alone even having a film made of an award-winning book and the story of my life and my journey through business. But here we are. And to many people, they ask me, Tom, how did you get to where you are? And I always like to quote some of the mentors I've had in my past. Napoleon Hill said that all things are created twice. They're created first in thought and second in the physical equivalent. And I have a lot of thoughts. For those of you who may know me, my brain is three-dimensional. I've been told that by others I work with. I can jump from the different quadrants left and right of my brain. If I'll be talking to you and somebody will say something and I'll have a thought and I'll jump into my creative brain and back and forth. So I see the world three-dimensionally. And so as we're making a feature film, there's a lot of things that are going on. What I want to do is use this series to share with you the behind-the-scenes work of how we're actually creating this feature film. We're going to have the next episode, Real News number 2. I'll be bringing on the award-winning director and a very talented man named Josh Menning. Now, Josh is the owner of an indie film company down in Ohio called Menning Films, and we've created a partnership between my company, KRE-AT. My company is a training and development company, and I'm the lead trainer in that company and the founder. And I basically, after 30 years of being a corporate executive and building and growing companies around the world, I decided a decade ago to create my own business, to take what I learned and to be able to teach. And I've developed a series of programs and courses that I teach through my training company. But how did we get to creating a feature film, and how did I get to create this partnership I just mentioned with Menning Films, an indie film company? I want to go back to something called my vision board. A lot of people in business will do visioning. Companies will create their vision of what their future will look like. In 2009, I had some interesting events in my life that occurred, and you'll find some of that noted in my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior. And I decided to seek and learn about the true meaning of my life. And I went through a program and I developed the vision of what my life would look like 5 years in the future. And one of the things I discovered is that my life was going to change, and I was going to develop a platform to get the word out about the mission that I have in my business and also based on the experience I've had in my personal life. And so what is the mission? Well, the vision board, and I'll be producing this into a larger small film at some point. I'll be putting in pictures, and one of the pictures I have, it's on the wall of my office, is my vision board, which actually shows a series of pictures, and one of them is a movie reel. One of them is a picture of a book. And so I manifested a lot of those things from my thinking, things that I was dreaming and thinking about and creating for getting the word out about all of my work. So let's go back a little bit and talk about how did we get here. We'll start back to 2016, I guess, and I wrote the book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior. Now, it was one of the things that I didn't intend to do. I'd been given a lot of books, and I thought, well, it's time that I put pen to paper and actually did something with my ideas. And many of you out there, if you haven't written a book before, it's not as hard as it looks, but the thing you have to get past in the first step is the fear of how do you do that. Just like becoming a movie producer in the Way of the Quiet Warrior film project, I had no experience of being a film producer, nor did I have experience of being an author. What happened was I got on an airplane and went to Holland, Michigan, and met with a company called the Wisdom Link. And there I still have a mentor. His name's John. And the company spent a day with me and helped me take all of the wisdom out of my head that went back decades in my career, and we created a business model to create the company, well, a play on words, KRE-AT, KRE-AT. You might see a little video in this production on that. And the whole idea was to create a business model where I could go out and I could teach and train business people based on the learnings and the experience I had in 30 years of being a leader in business. But as I was leaving that meeting, John said to me, he said, read this book, and the book was called Thought Leader. And I thought, well, okay, why should I read this? And John said, you need to write a book, Tom. And so for all of you watching who don't know what a thought leader is, you can be a thought leader. There are thought leaders all over the world. Maybe there's 2 or 3% of people who do something with the idea of thought leadership. A thought leader is somebody who sees the world through a very unique lens. A lot of times they see the world through their experiences or their story. My experiences is basically from being a kid growing up into the business world, becoming a manager and then a CEO of a company, and learning throughout how to create and build business, and then changes and all what I call fortuitous intersections in my life that led me down a path to discover really what is it I should do with all of this. And so John said, you know, you need to go out there and you need to share that and develop a platform. So let's talk about what the platform is. Now, my business platform as a thought leader includes my company, KRE-AT, where we do workshops and training and leadership development with people who are running companies around the world. Number 2 is the book. I wrote a book, and you know, when you're an author and you write a book, you really write a book to develop deep relationships with your readers. A lot of what I do as an author is to educate and entertain and inspire people through my word. The third part of my platform is, well, you're seeing me recording some of it here, is the Quiet Warrior Show. I decided to create a podcast. I was actually a guest on a podcast years ago by the publisher based out of New York, Morgan James Publishing, who believed in my story and published my book. And they invited me on a radio show, and I loved the experience, and I remember going away writing a note that I want to create my own radio show. And I want to thank a fellow named Jody Mayberry, who is a mentor to me, and through a series of Zoom meetings and mentoring, he helped me over a 2-month period launch my very first radio show. Now, the Quiet Warrior Show, you can subscribe to it. You'll find it on any of your favorite podcast channels. But that's also a big foundation around my platform, and I'll explain to you why that's important to the work I'm doing as it relates to the film. In 2016, in November, is when I launched the radio show. And it was just on a dream of having a podcast. I thought I'd do some interviews. Maybe as a thought leader, I would express my views and my thoughts of how I see the world through this unique lens I have. And that show basically took off. They told me many podcasts end at 10 episodes. We are now past 170 interviews in just 3 and a bit years. And I'm excited about it. And the pipeline of guests is just so full. Well, what did that do for the platform, and how does that relate to making a feature film? I believe that if you're going to be involved in the film industry, you need to have a platform to distribute the film, a platform where people can come and see your ideas and hear about the film. You have a better chance of success, especially when you get to later parts of the film project, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. The way of the Quiet Warrior, or the Quiet Warrior radio show, is across all internet channels. Now we're in 11 countries, and that's huge for my show, because now when I talk about the film project, the Way of the Quiet Warrior film project, I know that there may be people in 11 different countries who will hear about it. Later, as we get to post-production and releasing the film, we'll be able to communicate with those people about how they can actually see this film. So the platform that I have, not only including the things I've just mentioned, the radio show, it was missing something. And I remember when I wrote the book, some incredible things started to happen. As a new author, we're not known, and I want to thank all of my fans out there who support my book. When I wrote the book, it was really for the purpose of what my mentor John told me. Just write a book and get your thoughts out there so you can teach people, you can develop relationships with people. And that's what authors really want, is for people to learn from their work and maybe just take some action from something that they read in their books. I want to just read you some of the things that happened since I published the book. The book was published in July 4th, 2017. Now, early praise for the book, if you pick up a copy of it, you'll see 20 testimonials. Now, a testimonial is simply somebody's written a blurb, I call it, and we've put it into the book. If you go to my website, KRE-AT.ca, and go to my book page, you'll see the 20 testimonials that were written even before the book was released. And we sent that out to the manuscript of my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, 90 Days to the Life You Desire is the full title, to some 20 people that I'd known through my business network and through friendships. And we said, could you please read this and write an early review for it? And that's being published in the book and again on my book page on my website. Now, why this is important is what I didn't expect when I wrote this book is what would happen after I started marketing it. And this is something I want to make sure you understand, that when you write a book, nobody will know about it. You're not known. As a new author, you have to work every day to market it, to share it on social media, to talk about it in the media, to get out and find ways to, do interviews and book signings. I worked very hard for the first year, and I listened to what my publisher taught me, and they said, Tom, go out and get reviews. I'm excited to tell you that I have over 170 reviews that have been written by just people out in the world who have read this book. And those are posted across Amazon. Amazon.ca is the Canadian Amazon website, Amazon.com in American. And what I learned is, and what you may not know, is in each country there's an Amazon website. And each platform is separate. So when people read my book in Germany, which they have, they will post a review on the book itself on Amazon. And those reviews are vetted by Amazon and approved. So they have to be authentic. As we started to gather momentum and pick up reviews, when I crossed the first threshold of 25 reviews, which was a major milestone for the publisher said, Tom, if you get 25 reviews on any book, they will then share that with the sales reps who communicate with the distribution network, which is the stores that desire to carry your book. So this is why reviews really matter to an author. And my reviews started piling up. Now, in the first 25, it can be easy to get discouraged. And you think, oh, my goodness, it took a lot of, relationship building and asking people to check out the book. And other reviews were written by people I don't even know. But it takes time, and we started building in the base of reviews. And then something else happened, and I'm quite proud of this, that in July 4th, 2017, the official publishing date in the industry, it's called a pub date, I negotiated with my publisher to allow my book to be early released 3 months sooner. Now, as part of a strategy, and I was mentored by an expert in this area to run a best-selling campaign. Now, in the industry, people wonder, does bestseller really matter? And what I can tell you is if you achieve bestseller, that means you achieve the number one spot in whatever competition you're running in as number one. There's millions and millions of books out there in the world, so achieve number one is fairly significant. What my publisher said when I did that is that your life will be changed forever, and I didn't understand the significance of that, everyone. However, what I've learned is that whenever you walk on a stage, do public speaking, whenever you put in a proposal to attend a conference and teach, anywhere that media finds you, if you're able to say that I am a published author and I've achieved number one, it gives you more credibility. Now, this is not about ego. This is about getting the word out and having people know about your book. And why am I talking about this in relation to The Way of the Quiet Warrior feature film, the movie project? Because this is all part of the story about how did we actually get here that I wanted to tell. Now, I want to just digress for a minute. My brain is telling me people might be seeing you and you're sitting here in a black T-shirt and you haven't maybe shaved. And well, I was thinking about what do directors do when they get on set. And now I've been inspired by many directors. I watch a lot of movies. It's one of my favorite pastimes to learn and to be able to tell stories. Now, I am a storyteller, and behind many movies are also some narratives that I can recognize, such as the Joseph Campbell research to put the average person watching a movie into the heroic situation of the movie. Did you ever wonder why when you watch a movie you can't remember that movie sometimes, 2 weeks later? But there are some movies, and I remember Star Wars, for example, is an example of that, where I never forget, even 20, 30 years ago when I first saw the first Star Wars episode at a a drive-in theater sitting in my dad's Ford F-350 Super Cab truck with my family, with a tin can hanging on the window and the windows fogged up. And the sound was terrible. It was a huge 8-story screen, but it was the first Star Wars episode. And I remember watching that and being on the edge of my seat, wanting to know what was going to happen next to Luke Skywalker, and where were we going in this journey. And so Spielberg and Lucas, who created some of these epic films that I'm a fan of, followed the narrative of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, where if you can put people into the seat of the journey, into the characters, they'll be on the edge of their seat, and they'll want more, and they'll remember. I want to tell you a bit about brain science, that as a producer now in this film, I know that we are wired for narrative. We are wired to tell stories. And in fact, if I tell you a story, you're more apt to remember that story, and I create visual images for you. You remember it for a long time, versus if I just told you facts and figures. In fact, if I read the screenplay of the Way of the Quiet Warrior film, which we have now, and I'll be talking more about in just a bit, you'd probably forget all of it. But if I created a visual experience with characters and ups and downs and highs and lows and exciting music and a theme that rocked your socks, you would probably remember that for a long time. And that is the magic of movie making that I'm so inspired to be part of. And my life didn't start out wanting to be a movie producer. And that's why we're talking today about how did we get here, because there's many turns in this story. Going back to the book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, why do I talk about the book? Because it's the first time I'm going live talking about the backstory of the book, for a reason that it's connected to a major feature film project. I didn't think that would happen. So back to the way the reviews came together, we decided to run this bestseller campaign. And 3 months before, I believe it was April 2017, we early released a copy of the book on Amazon. And we ran a campaign which simply meant I worked with a campaign manager and was taught to contact everybody I know and ask them to go out and check out the book, to consider buying it between a window of time on a given day. And that drives up the numbers on Amazon. And if you can get into the top 100 on an Amazon, it becomes bestseller status. They actually tag your book with a bestseller banner. If you get into the number 1 spot, it becomes a number 1 bestseller. They screenshot that, the campaign manager captures all that data, and now you can use the moniker number 1 bestseller. Well, here's what happened on that day. I never forget it. I was driving in my car down the highway to a business meeting, and I was just so mesmerized and preoccupied with this bestseller campaign, and having not done it before, I had no idea where we were headed with this. And what happened was the campaign manager, who is in the United States, I'm in Canada, basically said, "Tom, you just hit number 1 in Canada." And I was just, okay, that's great. What the heck does that mean? And he said, "Well, we ran you in 3 categories that were tough categories." You see, they ran my book against some of the bigger names in the business categories. It's easy to run a campaign and position your book into categories that are easy to win. But when you're up against some of the great names in those categories, on that moment where you hit number 1, you have to actually surpass their book in terms of sales. It's all very complicated, but let me tell you what happened. We went number 1 in Canada in 3 different categories, and this is all screenshotted, and the evidence is on my website media page. But then something happened. I said to my media manager, campaign manager for this bestseller program, I said, "Hey, I want to be number 1 in the United States, because I know that at some point my vision is to take my work around the world, but particularly North America." Well, we hit number 1 in the U.S. in 3 categories, and at that moment we captured screenshots. We beat out some notables. These are big guns in the influencer market. Gary Vaynerchuk, who you might know, Damon John, who's one of the sharks and the CEO of this incredible company, Fubu. In fact, on the day we hit number 1 with the book, we beat out Tony Robbins, who is number 7. Now, Tony's done a lot of work writing books on personal development. So these 3 big names, we outpaced them and became number 1 in Canada and the U.S. And so when the book got that recognition, we started getting phone calls from producers and media. Now, I didn't expect this. I didn't have a campaign manager. But one of the first calls was from William Shatner. All of us who know Star Trek, and William Shatner is a Canadian, I'm proud to say that. But a producer called and said, we'd like to invite you to Hollywood to create a TV show on moving America forward. We'd like you to help us produce that and be part of that. And I was blown away. In fact, when I got that phone call, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a friend. You know, have you ever had that imposter syndrome? Now, this was, again, back after the book went #1. My phone started ringing. Well, I checked into it, and one thing led to another, and we went to Hollywood, my wife and I. As the founder of the company KRE-AT and the writer of this now #1 best-selling book, we were featured on a 30-minute TV show. And William Shatner interviewed me, and then I spent time with Doug Llewellyn. For those of you who don't know that name, People's Court was a famous court show. It was one of these sitcoms, I guess you can call it, back a couple decades ago. And Doug Llewellyn was a court reporter. So he sat with me in studio and interviewed me. He held up my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, and he started talking about it. And we won an award called Moving America Forward for starting a business and creating a book, and in that book, some teachings that would help move the world forward by developing people who are leaders of companies. Now, I was blown away, everybody, and I'm still today thinking back. If you want to see that TV show, it's on my media page, KRE-AT, KREAT.ca. You go to the media page, you'll find the Moving America Forward press release from 2016 or 17. You'll be able to see the full production of that TV show, and it aired across 45 million households in North America and across internet TV in Canada. So again, the book started picking up momentum, and as a guy who had never written a book, my goal was simply to write a book to use it as a tool to teach in my business. Well, now we have 170 online reviews written, the Moving America TV show behind us, and I started getting more requests to write articles for media. And you'll be able to find some of those articles on the media page of our website. And those articles all connected back to the book and what we are doing with the platform that I've just been describing to you. And we're at about 20 minutes of this live stream now, so thank you for your patience. I want to take the story now to the next level, which is something that happened in 2017 when I went to Nashville, Tennessee. Now, that was a critical point in the story of how we got to be the movie The Way of the Quiet Warrior. And my publisher, Morgan James Publishing, is a New York publishing house. And I want to tell you that it's very difficult to get a book published. I'm a literary scout now in the industry of publishing. So those of you who see this, who maybe have a manuscript or have written something that you want to take to the industry, you can always connect with me, and I'll share with you the process. Millions of manuscripts get written every year, but very few of them make it into publishing. Here's why: because the bar when you're in the publishing world as an author is very high. Your manuscripts have to pass many bars of quality and integrity. And what the publishers, the good ones, will tell you is they buy you first before they buy your book. You see, I wrote my book, but my book is really based on my learnings and my experience in life and business. They look hard in the soul of the author. You know, is this person congruent to what they're writing about? What is their mission and purpose behind their work? Are they doing it for fame, or they're doing it for a purpose beyond themselves? Well, my publisher believed in my story, and Morgan James published it. And they invited me down to Nashville, Tennessee for something that no other publisher had done at the time, which was called the Red Carpet Event. Again, on my media page, you'll see my interview. It was 2 or 3 minutes, where they interviewed me holding my book on a red carpet. And Nashville, Tennessee is a really cool place. I'd never been there before. So my wife and I took a trip down there. And I had my blue suit on. I was told, dress up because this is your chance to be at the Oscars for books. And I remember walking into that room that day, and it was a ballroom in a small boutique hotel. Never forget the hotel. It was called the Preston Hotel. And there was a gentleman sitting at the table, and we'll talk about him in a moment as well. And his name was Eddie Anders. And at one of the next episodes of the Real News series, I'll be talking about the film team we've built. It's important to know the others behind this, and Eddie Anders was one of them. And Eddie was there debuting his first book, and we met, and I hadn't talked to him probably for a couple years after that. I found his book interesting. It was called Waking Up Dead. I also found out that he was a phenomenal individual from the music industry. So he was a performer, and he had performed and created music, collaborated with some of the greats around the world. I mean, the list of the people that he worked with was incredible. He also had an amazing voice and an ability as a musician. And so I was thinking about, Eddie's a good guy. Maybe at some point down the road we might engage. I brought him onto my podcast, my internet radio show, The Quiet Warrior Show. You can find the episode. And he talked about his book, and he talked about the story behind it. And at that time, we parted ways, and I wished him luck. The next person I met through the journey of becoming an author and writing my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, was a fellow named John Kitson. Now, his real name is John Smith, but he decided to use a name for his publishing because there's a million John Smiths out there. And this is all legit. But anyway, I met John, and one thing led to the other. And what authors do a lot of times is when we write books, we tend to help other authors by reading each other's books. We inspire each other. We learn from each other. And I want to say to you that I do some traveling in my car. I listen to audiobooks. I probably listen to 2 books a month and read some books as well. You can develop a wealth of knowledge and positivity in your thinking just by reading content. In fact, you can get a university degree by reading. I think one of the powerful ways of having your education upgraded is to just find books. So as I met John Kitson, he wrote a book called Song of the Tree Frogs. And it had a pretty funky title, and I thought, And so John and I got to know each other just from Zoom and video conferencing. He lives in Ohio, and I'm up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. By the way, just to digress on that, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, Hollywood North, they call it. Canada does a $2 billion a year industry from the movie industry. In fact, as I sit here, and we'll be doing some short videos, some live streaming out on site as I develop this series for the movie back content. One of the things that we have is we have film studios everywhere. You might watch movies, for example, that it's Lionsgate Film Studios. Well, that's right here in our backyard. And it employs many, many people in that industry, and it's a major part of our economic growth here in Canada. In fact, there's significant tax credits to creating and filming movies up here in Canada, and we call it Hollywood North, not for just that reason, but the cinematography, in fact, the scenery in Canada, particularly the West Coast, is spectacular. Vancouver has been acclaimed as one of the top 10 cities to live in. It's won number 1 on that list many years. And we have many landmarks because we have the 4 Seasons. We're a world-class city with a port surrounded by water. There's a lot here to do in the film industry. And B-roll, which is when they film in the industry and they just use the video footage, there's no actual speaking or audio. A lot of B-roll is done up here in Canada and put into movies that you might see on TV, even though they're not filmed in Canada. So anyway, John and I struck up a relationship, and I found out that he was also working in the movie industry. He was not only an author, but he's working in the movie industry on another production called Gateway to Hope, and it was about the opioid crisis. So this is another turn in the story. If you're staying with me, as I said, this story takes many turns leading up to why we're creating the film. So just continue to bear with me. And John and I started talking, and he said, "Why don't you read my book?" So I gave him my book, and we started reading our books simultaneously. And when I read the first chapter in John's book, The Song of the Tree Frogs, and it is a novel, I was blown away. In fact, it freaked me out because I said that first chapter could be the story of my life as a kid and could be the first chapter in my book, which I wrote as a business book, but I also wrote it with some fable stories to illustrate experiences I've had in life with other people. John read the first chapter of my book, and he sent me an email, and I still have that somewhere, and he said, "Oh my God," he said, "this book could have been the first chapter of my book, Tom." And so our minds crossed, our missions, our pathways crossed with just by writing those 2 books, and there was a common thread in our stories. And I won't steal the thunder, but the common threads in our stories is what has led us to come together and collaborate in making a movie together, which is going to be, we believe, an epic movie. So John and I, as fellow authors, met, and here we are reading each other's books, and the theme crossed over in the first chapter. It was a similar story. One was reality nonfiction, and one was a fictional novel. So I said to John, why don't you come on my radio show? And I said, tell you what, I'd like to help you in some way. And you're working on a film called the Gateway to Hope about the opioid crisis. And by the way, if you want to find that film, Mending Films, and it's now, I believe, on Amazon Prime and many of the streaming services as well. It was previewed in or premiered in the movie theaters by Mending Films. So amazing story. And the reason why it resonates with me is because I've spent a decade in the area of mental health as a volunteer at a board level, learning about mental health, supporting through a not-for-profit organization on my own time. And through that, I found the opioid crisis. It's not only on the streets of our great city, and it's a blight that most cities have, but it was out of control. In fact, I have a good friend whose brother lost a daughter to the opioid crisis. Funny enough, I'm a TED speaker. I did my first TED Talk. You can find that on my website or on YouTube. I did it February 29th, 2020 at the Bell Center for Performing Arts in Surrey, British Columbia. And in the studio, I met another TED speaker, and he actually was a gentleman who lived for many years in an 8 square block radius of our downtown east side, we call it, which is where all the people who are struggling with addictions, I call it the area where marginalized people are just sent away to die. That's not a nice thing to say, but that's how society treats this problem. As the numbers started growing with the opioid crisis, and having met this individual, I was blown away because he found his way out through a safe injection site, then through getting professional medical care and being given options to move his way out of the addiction now he has a family and he has a job, and he's doing a lot of amazing work around the world to help people understand the whole issue of the opioid crisis and the way maybe forward. So look more for that on YouTube. You'll find his talk. It's called You Can't Save a Dead Addict. One of the things he told me in that episode, I interviewed him on my radio show as well, is he said, Tom, I overdosed 6 times. I should have been dead 6 times. Yeah, absolutely incredible. I want to tell you a quick story, though, and this is another parallel to the movie project that through the work I do volunteering in the not-for-profit sector, we not only provide beds and shelters for homeless people with the work that I'm doing, we also provide services for people who are marginalized, who need help dealing with addictions, who need perhaps resources to find their way to get through that chapter and recover. And I went into one of Canada's first safe injection sites called Insight. This was a trailer setup, and I did a tour of it a couple years ago, and my heart just grew. I walked in the door, and they told me to be quiet, and I saw these chairs lined up, almost like you have cubicles in a workplace. You had all these cubicles, and there was a person sitting with somebody else, and it turned out there was a health practitioner, probably a nurse, and somebody who was addicted to some type of drug. And that person was being administered safely their drugs, and then given opportunities and programs to be educated and maybe find their way to safely move on from that addiction. They also told us that there were people that would be sitting there who would be overdosing. And the problem with the opioid crisis is, as you know, on the streets, when bad drugs are found, they're injected unsafely and people overdose, and those drugs killed very quickly. Well, in safe injection sites, in this particular one that I was in, I could see, and I literally said that any one of those people, when I looked down these cubicles, could be my daughter. It could be your son or daughter. I was horrified. But my heart grew because these people were there getting help, and many of them were being saved from overdose. So why am I telling you that part of the story? Well, because it leads back to, again, the vision and the experiences that we have in our lives. As I said up front, Napoleon Hill, who's a great thought leader, said, everything is created twice, once in thought and once in the physical equivalent. I had a thought to go out and seek understanding of mental health and understanding of some of these addictions. Those who have read my book know my father was heavily addicted to alcoholism, and I believe he had an underlying mental health issue from his own childhood. And I started learning about drugs and what place that plays with people in life who, through one maybe thing that was said to them in their early years, feel self-worth is lacking, feel they're not enough, and they end up in the wrong path taking drugs, and they don't know these powerful drugs can be addictive. So that's why I'm telling you this part of the story and what it has to have to do with the movie we're creating. The movie's not about opioids or the opioid crisis, but it's about that thread in the story that led me to meeting this fellow John Kitson, who's a fellow author, who is involved in making a feature film about the opioid crisis. Again, I never would have thought that 10 years ago I would be sitting here meeting somebody and talking to them about something like that. At the time I met John, I had told him, come on my radio show, The Quiet Warrior Show. I want to help you. And that's what I do. I help other people get their stories out. And I said, bring the director of that film, who happened to be Josh Menning of Menning Films. I hadn't heard about the company, but it was an indie film company that was on the move. They had won some awards and they had done several productions, and there was a gift there. And I want to just tease you here a little bit and tell you that, and this is not me speaking from ego or being biased because I'm doing a film with this company. I have seen the work this company has done, and this young director, I believe it's like looking at a young Steven Spielberg. The mind of this director and the ability through the lens for what he's done is incredible. And so I did the interview. I brought them on my show. You can find it on the Quiet Warrior Show. Probably a couple years ago was the episode. And they came on with the lead star of the movie. Now that person, I won't make this show about that. You can find out more about them. But this individual came on, and he was an individual that the movie was made about because he was the one who was addicted and almost lost his life and found his way through that. And that's why the movie was called Gateway to Hope. So we did this interview, and it went really well. And I said, look, guys, I don't know why we met, but I'm glad to have served you and get your word out about your movie. But at some point, our paths will cross again. And that is my other message to those who are wanting to be a thought leader, or maybe those who are wondering, why do people come into my life? I learned a long time ago from a fellow named Darcy Rezac, who was the chair of the Vancouver Board of Trade. Most cities have a Board of Trade. This is where business people come together for luncheons. And I remember growing up in my career, especially when I became an executive, being invited to luncheons and then eventually having a membership with the Board of Trade. And you would go for these hour lunches and see keynote talks from business leaders, and you would learn. And the biggest part of that was networking. And Darcy Rezac wrote a book called Work the Pond. And he said, don't take from your network until you give. So give to get. And I think if you believe the law of the universe, if you're into reading the Bible and what Jesus' story or God's story teaches us, we serve others and we will always get. We don't have to worry if we take from a point of serving others. I believe it's a strong character trait. So here we are at 37 minutes of this first Real News episode, and I'm talking about the Board of Trade and networking. Again, it's part of the story as to how did we get here. So let me take you from this point forward. We just talked about doing a interview with an author and Menning Films owner and director, Josh Menning, a couple years ago, and then we parted ways. Through the next set of circumstances, my radio show grew to 11 countries. It's now in 11 countries around the world, 170 episodes, and we're growing and growing. Every month with such amazing guests finding us. And so as I continued to get the word out and my book continued to grow, I decided to write another book. And I'm excited to tell you that my second book, The Quiet Warrior Teaches Genie, has been picked up by the New York Publishing House, Morgan James Publishing again, and we'll be publishing it this year. Much more work to do, but it's an incredible book with a collaboration between myself and a lady named Donna J. Setterland, who is her experience in her industry. She's known as an Imagineer, a illustrator, so she illustrates stories visually, as done in the classic Disney type style. And she's also an author and a writer, and she's the CEO of a company called Zontoria Productions. And her and I are collaborating and working on some other creative things around that. Why it's important to tell you is that along this journey, we still haven't come to the point of making the Way of the Quiet Warrior film. It hasn't even evolved yet. But I've been making relationships with people and just helping people. And people have been coming into my life. So Donna came into my life, and the second book we're going to be, as I said, publishing soon. So a lot going on. And then something tremendous happened in my life. If you've seen my TED Talk, you'll know about it. In January of 2018, my father unexpectedly died of a heart attack. Now, my dad was talked about in my first book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, a little bit, but a lot of the film that we're producing will have the information about what happened after the book, as well as more detailed information from the backstory of some of the stories in the book. You see, when I wrote that book, it was done as fables to teach, but I didn't get into the real details of all those stories. So a lot of that is going to be in this feature film that we're talking about. Well, my dad passed away, and it was a tough time, and I miss my dad. I love my dad. And then about 6 months later, I had registered to do something called the Ride to Conquer Cancer. And there I was, over 2 days, up and down hills on my bicycle, riding 225 kilometers. For those who aren't on the metric system, I think that's about 150 miles. Now think about it. I've never done a 150-mile ride in 2 days on a bike. I trained for 3 months. I didn't even have a bike, and I borrowed one from a good friend of mine, John McComb, who will also come together in this movie in some way. John is an award-winning broadcaster who has his own story about battling mental health and being successful in the public eye. I borrowed John's bike. First night of the ride, feeling great after 120 kilometers, slipped and fell in a bathtub, cracked my head so hard, blacked out, put a hole in the tub surround. My wife was in the motel room where we stayed, and my life stopped. I had my first mild traumatic brain injury, and I don't know why they call it mild, but I had a concussion that was pretty severe, and I've been battling that now. It's over almost 2.5 years. For the first 6 months or so, I was a mess. I slipped into a cycle of depression. I literally couldn't function cognitively. My eyes wouldn't focus to the light. I had all these other things. And over 2 years, seeing 12 experts and doctors and specialists, I'm well on the mend, but I still struggle with some of my cognitive functions. And why I'm telling you that is because that's another fortuitous intersection in the story of how did we get to where we are with this film. Through the fog of a concussion, I guess you'd say, I spent a lot of time on my own, probably a year at home, just ruminating and dealing with counselors and people who were teaching me to go out and do physical things while I couldn't work properly in my business. And I started writing, and I started having all these thoughts and discovering that there was really more that I needed to do. And so that led me to doing a TED Talk. And the TED Talk was the next part of my platform as a thought leader, was to develop an idea I had, an idea worth sharing. That's what TED is all about. If you know what TED is, the acronym TED stands for Technology, Engineering, and Design. And I remember the story that TED started back in Silicon Valley a long time ago with a bunch of technology people who got together, engineers, I think it was just a small group, and they were to mastermind and create ideas and change the world. And what happened is it didn't go anywhere, and then Chris Anderson, who's now the CEO of TED Global, came in, bought the company, and it became TED. And TED basically around the world is a recognized brand that has huge value. People know about it. And TED got so big with its TED Talks, and this is another notable fact for Vancouver, the main stage for the annual TED event, the global event, where the likes of Bill Gates and even presidents of countries have come and done their TED Talks. It's in Vancouver. And in fact, I think it's $10,000 a ticket to get in, and it's 5 days, I believe, because my TED curator of my TED Talk went to it. It's 5 days of something like 70 TED Talks from around the world. It's incredible. They even custom designed the staging in the Vancouver Convention Center that every year comes out and has a West Coast feel for that global TED event. I don't know if you knew that, but it's the home of it's in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, right here. TED got so big it had this vision to expand globally, but it couldn't do it from its one main stage, so it started issuing licenses independently to what's called TEDx, and these are the TEDx stages. And somebody asked me the other day, what's the difference between a TED Talk and a TEDx Talk? And I chuckled and said, the X. Because really a TED independent stage has to follow the same criteria of a TED Talk. It's really hard to get in to do a talk, but you got to do it if you have a vision and idea. For those of you who know my story, my first talk, I was auditioning for it, and that was the week my father passed away, and I was a mess. And I was stubborn, and I still did it. I even moved the funeral date My brothers were a little frustrated with me, so I could do the TED Talk. Didn't make it. Was very disappointed, quite depressed about it. Decided to do it again. But I was dealing with, when I applied for my second TED Talk, this brain injury in this fall I just told you about that happened while I was doing this Ride to Conquer Cancer. And so imagine doing another TED Talk and applying and auditioning for it, but doing it with a brain injury and cognitive issues where your memory, short term, you can't remember things. You can't use your eyes properly. That's what it was like when I stood on the audition stage. And thankfully, I prayed a lot on it, and I had some people helping me, some speaking coaches. I qualified to do my TED Talk. And so I did the TED Talk February 29th, 2020, as I had mentioned a moment ago. And that became part of the next journey in the feature film. And what you'll see in the feature film as we make it is there'll be a thread of that TED Talk, which is going to shape an epic part of the film. And so more on that later. So here I am, and I've done my TED Talk, and I'm still, spending time by myself, still doing some work. And I started doing some side hustles where I was using my body physically. I worked as a night stalker at a warehouse. I waited tables at a restaurant. Yes, I can say that without fear of what other people think of me, because it's the reality. When you become injured, sometimes you have to work in a different category. And so through that whole process over a year, I started thinking, wouldn't it be great to take this entire story and somehow create something with it? And so I remember I was at my lowest point and just not feeling great about the future. I couldn't see it. And I went to a course on mental health because I was struggling with depression, and they taught us skills. And one of the skills was to create a happy distraction, to do something you love and to enjoy, to create more positive thinking. Well, I knew that I liked to write, and I also knew that I had this very creative brain that liked to dump out ideas, wild, crazy ideas, and then manifest them into the physical equivalent. Now, how have I done that? As a CEO, when I ran companies, I would surround myself with people smarter than me. It's not rocket science. And I would create a vision and inspire or get people to believe in that, and then they, with me, would build it. And I had this idea, and it came to me one day that, wait a minute, going back to what I said about networking, remember, you give to your network before you ask. I had just made relationships with a film company and relationships with people in the industry. And I called up John, who was my mentor, and I said, John, fellow author, I'd like you to get my book into the hands of Mr. Menning. So we sent the book to Mr. Josh Menning, and he read it, and he was just blown away by it and inspired. He told me how important a read it was. And so the idea, let's get on a conference call, and we did. And we started riffing. And remember, this was probably now about a year and a half ago. We started talking about, would this story be worthy of creating a feature film? Not a film that's going to be, just a film somewhere on a streaming, but somewhere the film that could be shown around the world in theaters, also on the next generation of movie distribution, which is all the big streamings like Netflix and Amazon Prime, etc. When I went into that meeting, everybody, I didn't have any idea whether this would be a project that would even go anywhere. But that's the message I want to tell you, that if you have a thought and you have a dream and you have a vision, you just keep moving forward and you try different things. You almost fail your way to success. And you don't worry about the money, you don't worry about the how. You just take that vision idea and you find people to believe in it, and you build a team. So we're almost at the end of this Real News 1 episode. I know I've been with you for quite a while now. Come back and watch it if you missed it. But we're going to take this episode and we're going to carve it up and create a production with it. This and the other ones that you'll be seeing over the next year, which I hope will be a mini documentary film about the making of the Way of the Quiet Warrior film. And I'm already told the director of the film that we can use this footage that in any way we want as bonus material for the film. So there's some method to the madness. So going back to the idea of the film, it took off. And so I had no idea, how do you make a film? I know people in the industry from business. I certainly watched a lot of movies and seen some documentaries about, behind the camera. this has been an amazing experience. So I hope on the other episodes I'm going to do here, we're going to take you through the journey so that you can be in the seat of the producer, the director, the actors. I'm going to tease you now, but some of the exciting things I have planned for future episodes, we're going to have in our next episode the director and award-winning Menning Films, Mr. Josh Menning, who's going to come on and who's going to share with you pre-production, what does that mean? Post-production, production, what are the steps in making a movie like this or any other feature film? We may even talk about other things where he shares some of the language and some of the challenges that is seen in the industry with COVID-19. We're going to really get a buzz here with that next episode. I'm excited to bring that to you probably in the next month. My plan as we do more of these series is to bring on actors once we've built the team of actors. And by the way, I've said to my movie team, we're not going to spare any expense. We're not going to worry about money. When I've built strategies in the past for companies, you start with the end in mind, and then you create the budget, and then you go out and you fund it. If you start with the end in mind being we don't have enough money, you're going to end up with a mediocre production. So right now there's no limits to what we want to do. We want this to be a world-class film with talent where the producer will go out and look for the best talent possible. And so lots of work to be done. After we met and we decided to kick this off, they said, Tom, we want you to help us write the screenplay. And I'm honored that they made me a producer in the film. And the reason why I wanted to be a producer in this film is because it's a film about my life and my life in business and experiences I've had. It's a film with many threads, many social issues, and many opportunities where people who will see it will get into the film and say, that's my story. They'll be able to learn something. They'll be able to have hope. They'll maybe be able to take a different direction in their life. This film is all about making an impact and changing the planet in some way. And we use the word epic, not for ego, but we want this to be a film that is seen worldwide and is a film that people will tell others to watch because of the content. And so they said, write some stuff. And I said, well, you already have the book. So what I did was, again, in the midst of having this brain injury, and it was very difficult because I said to the producer, the director and the production team, I can't really write and effectively do this. I'm struggling through this injury, but I will do it. So it took me 6 months, everyone, and I have put together a binder. It's about 4 inches thick of material, some 300 pages by the time it was all done. And in it, I took the Way of the Quiet Warrior book itself, and I took all the chapters of the stories in that book, and I created a narrative on what they actually meant. What was the real people and the real events behind those stories? Now, we're not going to do this film in a way that it's going to, reveal identities of people other than those people in my own life, which is part of my story. But we're going to use the themes of the experiences that I portrayed in the book as teaching moments in this film, which are epic. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to be sharing. I also said to the producer, when do you want this? And they said, well, as soon as you can get it to me. So I couriered it down and they received it. And so at that point, Josh Menning, the director of the film, John Kitson, who is another producer who I've talked a lot about on this call, who, by the way, has just released Song of the Tree Frogs, their next movie, and it's epic. I've looked at it. It's an amazing film. You got to check it out. John is also a university professor down in the United States, and he's also someone who is very artistic. He sings, and he's also a faith-based man. He does a lot of teaching in his church. It's incredible the depth of his knowledge and his talent. So now the film team has myself and the director and another producer. As we do the next Real News episodes, I'm going to be bringing to you other members of the film team. We've really excited to tell you we've signed up somebody who has a very, very deep background in the music industry. We've also brought on board somebody who has a very deep background in infusing humor, dark humor or light humor into scripts so that the audience can receive somewhat difficult information in a movie. They can receive it and go deeper by breathing, by having a chuckle, having a laugh. And that was some of the learning from my TED Talk, that humor in anything we do, whether it's a public speech or whether it's a movie that might have difficult content at times, humor is a way to get to people's heart, to get them to laugh. let go from the edge of their seat and receive more. So more on that member of our team that we've brought on, about his background and how I'm working with him as we're creating this incredible screenplay. Once the director team received the package of information, we started writing the screenplay. And I'm going to just tease you a little bit on that there's some tools that the film industry uses. There's an online platform called Celtics where you literally can collaborate and screenplays are written. It formats it. And so the producers and the writers are in there. They gave me access to it, and it's been kind of fun watching it as it's evolved. And I've been contributing to that in a big way. So the material I sent in, which is combined from my own Lifeline plus the Way of the Quiet Warrior book and my entire platform or work I've done, we've taken that, and the first thing is they laid it out into sort of a storyline for the movie. And that took several months. And in fact, it went off the rails a bit because of COVID-19 and other things and distractions. But we got back on track with it, and we started doing Zoom calls with the movie team. And those Zoom calls gave updates, and we kept pushing forward. Then once the screenplay draft was done, the process I followed was to download it as a producer and to take it, and I went through it, and I read it out loud, and I went through it to look for various things. I'm just going to tell you a few of those things now without getting into the screenplay itself. I looked for my voice. The way it's written, does it hold my voice, how I talk, what I say? A lot of the character that's going to act me in the movie will be a business person, so is the persona right? We started looking at other characters that were part of my lifeline, from my family to my mother and father, and really looking at how can we bring those characters to life in a way where people say, wow, that I knew those people, and that is really how they were in their characters. As we went through, we went back and forth in an iterative process on the screenplay, and then we ended up with a draft that was acceptable to me and the team. The next thing we did was we sent that draft to the consultant that we brought on the team. His name's Noel Bentley, and I'm going to share with you more about him in another episode. But he's the one who is helping us infuse humor points into the script so that the audience can get on this roller coaster ride. Now, I want to tell you about one of the things I said to the film team. I saw the movie Rocket Man by Elton John. If you haven't seen it, it's a great film. I'm a big Elton John fan. By the way, when I did my TED Talk, my speaking coach said go in the bathroom and look in the mirror and belt out a song to get your voice and your range, and I chose Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. I'm a big fan, and I watched his movie over and over, and I saw him speak about it, and he said, I'm very happy with the way my film turned out. He said, as a producer in the film, I wanted the highest highs and the lowest lows. And he said, I think the film did justice. The fans love it, has great music. And that's what I want to do with The Way of the Quiet Warrior film, is to have the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, incredible epic music throughout. A bit of a teaser here. The individual I mentioned from the music industry is now composing the song, which we hope will be an award-winning song for the movie. Incredible. And I'll be getting a first cut of that, probably the first performance of it and the lyrics. I've already seen some of it, and it's blown my mind. But we're collaborating. He's sending it to me with his initial thoughts, and I'm looking at the lyrics and seeing if it lands on my soul based on the theme of the film. And then I'm talking to my production team about it as well. So I expect that in the next month we may have the first draft of that theme song, which will be performed in the movie in a creative way. And I no doubt we'll be looking for some award-winning talent to perform it. And that when you produce movies, I've learned that first thing you do to get the word out, no different than an author, is you run it in campaigns or competitions. So movie competitions, film festivals, so you can get awards for the film. Not for ego, everybody, but to get the actors and the people known and to get the film distributed widely. So everything we're doing now is a method to the madness, creating an epic theme song for it by an award-winning composer and musician is all part of what's come together, which, remember, I said when I started my thinking on this project, it wasn't about a movie, it was about writing a book connected to my business. Let me finish with this as I wrap this up, and thank you for being with me if you stayed the hour. If you haven't, we'll be producing this into a YouTube premiere video and also putting it on my podcast, The Quiet Warrior Show. And all this footage will be put into a mini documentary film. When we finish the entire film project, that will be released hopefully as some bonus content. So you really understand the inside journey behind making a film like this. I want to leave it at this. I'll be bringing on Mr. Josh Menning, the director and owner of Menning Films, in our next Quiet Warrior Real News episode 2. Look for that in about a month. I'd like you to go to my YouTube channel, that's Tom Dutta, and subscribe to it. And subscribe to it for 2 reasons. You can get the episodes of my radio show there, but also we'll be putting these productions that I'm doing for the Real News over there as well. You can keep up with the film. We'll also be revealing to you a website where you can go and sign up to get updates from the film. This is a website page that was put together by the movie company, Menning Films. And as you see behind me, my screensaver is actually a teaser. This is the concept poster for the movie. Now, the concept poster, if you go to your movies at the cinema, remember, when you walk down the hallways and you see all these matinee boards, coming soon, coming soon? Well, the movie company designed this concept poster, and the movie is called The Way of the Quiet Warrior, and it says based on true events. My big head's in the way there. But at the very top, you'll see Menning Films, and you'll see a little bit about the production. At the bottom of the poster in full, you'll see the logo of KRE-AT, which is my company, and then you'll see the Menning Films company logo. We did a press release about a year ago saying that we'd come together to collaborate to create this film. You can find that press release on the website create.ca under the media page if you want to see more about what we said at that time about our vision for this film. And so everybody, I'm going to wrap up with this. Taking any thought you have, you too, if you have a thought, if you have a story, can turn it into anything, including a film. And I'm passionate and excited to tell you that we're moving forward full steam in 2021 to the next step after our screenplay, which is almost finished, to what we call the marketing and funding stage. And then there'll be obviously the talent stage where we put the actor team together. That'll be exciting. And then filming. We've made a big decision. I'm so excited to film this movie in Canada, as well as there'll be parts of it filmed in the United States. And I'll be scouting with the film team for locations based on this screenplay. And I can tell you that some of the vistas and what you'll be seeing in this movie will be incredible because of the country we live in, Canada. It has all the incredible scenery, all the 4 seasons. I'm just going to lead over now and just pull out one thing to show you before I let you go. And that is, don't know if you can see this, but it's a Surloxed booklet. This is the screenplay for the movie. I'm holding it in my hands. I'm so excited, and quite frankly, I'm still in awe that we got to this point just from thinking about a movie. How do you do that? It's about a 98 page script. In movie making, 1 page of script is the equivalent of 1 minute of production. So as we stand right now, this script will be evolved as we start rolling with production. And what I've learned from the director is even as we're doing the film, we'll be on set when the film's being done. It'll change. There'll be emotions and things that will happen with some of the actors. We'll be looking at some of the lines in this, and as we hear them performed, we might shift on the fly and change it. But the core of what's in here in my hands, everybody, I've read it. Other people I know have read it, and I think you're going to be blown away by this amazing production, which no doubt we will hope to release, if not in 2021, barring COVID's cooperation, absolutely 2022. We'll be doing a premiere. My vision is to have one in Canada, inviting all the VIPs who are involved and in the networks we have, and also doing one in the United States because that's where my beloved film team is, and they have a lot of people there. There'll be opportunities to be involved in this film, I'm sure. Everybody wants to be an extra. Everybody wants to maybe contribute in some way. So more on that as this story evolves. Well, thanks everybody for being with me on the Quiet Warrior Film Real News Episode 1. I'll see you again on Episode 2. Thank you.